some of the patrons have asked the questions, and today's question was about vibrations. Someone asked on the patrons site saying, what are vibrations and how can we raise our vibrations, and what do we actually mean by that? So it's a word we banter around a lot of the time, this idea of vibration. And perhaps there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, or perhaps there's some misconceptions about it, or what do we actually mean by it? So I thought I'd start off today by just having a little chat about that. And then I'll bring you all in on the Zoom to ask your questions or put your input or what you think about what we mean by this. So have a think as I'm talking. And also anybody joining us on YouTube, of course, your comments will be very interesting too to see in the comments below, because it's always interesting to see, you know, what do we mean by this? Can we clarify what we mean by vibrations? Now, I suppose everything in the universe vibrates, doesn't it? Everything from the atoms to energy, everything in existence, in material existence, vibrates. It moves. And everything is some form of vibration, one way or another. And from a psychological point of view, first and foremost, we can judge a person's vibration, as it were, by measuring the brainwaves. The brainwaves of a person will have things such as alpha waves, which we have when we are in a state of meditation and quietude, and beta waves that come into the brain when we are in a state of more active thought and general day-to-day thought. And also we have other ones such as delta waves and things which come in only when we're in a state of absolute sleep and quietude. So on a psychological level, yeah, we have vibrations. The brain has these various levels of thought, various levels of thinking that we can measure. And from a materialist point of view, that's it. You know, okay, that could be what we could call vibrations in a person, you know, because the materialists, unlike, I suppose, the mystics, if we give some other alternative, do not believe that anything extends beyond the brain. Everything exists within the brain. Everything in the material world is just dark, really. It's just matter functioning. And that inside our brain, that's where our world is. And it goes no further than that. But when you start to explore a bit more, please turn off your mics, please. If we start to explore this idea, we as spiritually minded people might believe in the idea that our consciousness extends beyond the brain. For example, telepathy is something where it seems that thought has gone outside the brain. And when you explore this idea deeper, all the time our thoughts are extending outside the brain. They're going out on wings. I certainly have proven this to myself. Please turn your microphones off, everybody. I have proven this to myself through the mediumship, because what happens with mediumship is that obviously we're connecting with people in the spirit world. And this idea of thoughts extending outside the body, I think can be taken into some quite interesting realms, because when you think about it, first of all, we are just a vibration. In some forms of thought, they talk about this idea of being like almost like the vibration of what we are, our personality and everything is like a scent. It's like a color. There's an idea called Vasana in Indian thinking, which is the idea that there's this surface level of our being, but also there's another aspect of our being that's not seen, that's not noticed, not seen, which is the part of ourselves, the vibrations we bring forward from previous lives, for example, what the psychologist Carl Jung would have called the unconscious mind. So we have this like personal unconscious, this side of ourselves that is also a vibration that's there in the background. We are like a being that we only see part of that being that's projected into the world. And beyond that, there's also this idea of this, which we could call the collective unconscious mind, that there's another level of vibration behind us still, where we're all interconnected. This could be called the universal mind or the unconscious. And it's perhaps through that unconscious mind, through that universal mind, that we connect in new ways, that we connect between ourselves as spiritual beings, that we actually can share our vibrations, share our thoughts, and share our experiences. And that indeed this whole idea may account for the very fact of how we evolve, because we are sharing experience collectively. There's kind of like a collective unconscious. I was sat recently with it was a nice evening, and we were sat looking at a log fire that we built in the garden. I was round my daughter Celeste's house and talking to her boyfriend Mark there, and we were looking at the fire together, and we're saying, you know, this connects us, doesn't it, this fire? When we look at the fire, I always think to myself, you know, people millions of years ago were staring into fires like this and looking at the pictures in the fire and looking up at the stars in the sky. And when we do things like this, it connects us to those people in the past, not just through some sentimental memory, but it actually connects us with people in the past, because the vibrations that we are connecting with there go through time. They go deep into the past and far into the future too. So this is where I say that what we're doing with the idea of vibration is we're tuning ourselves, almost like a radio signal. So when I want to connect with the spirit world, for example, I have to sort of kind of raise my vibration, take it up from the sluggish world of this material world that we live in into a sort of a finer vibration that connects with the spirit world. So I'm trying to push my energy up in my brain. I do it through various techniques we can talk about in a moment perhaps, and the spirit world simultaneously kind of bring their energy down. So we get a point where the two combine, and then click, we can make a connection. I've had to take my energy level up, they brought their energy level down to mine, and connect. We make a thought connection. And this same idea of tuning in, this same idea of getting on the same vibratory level with one another happens when people who care about each other connect, and we get two vibrations that connect with telepathy, and click, again, we share a thought, we share a feeling. So this sort of thing I think is going on all the time in the background. Most of the time we're kind of still tied up in this material world. Oh dear.
Farhan, the same
can you turn your
my
microphone off,
partner
please?
before. Very tall, good looking. Yeah, that's the type of.
Good. So all the time we're connecting in this idea of on a level unconsciously. We're connecting with our vibrations on another level. And so what it means is that we can, if we think about it, you know, okay, I've applied it in my life to do a mediumship, but that we can also work on many, many other levels. So you think about, we can also resonate, can't we? If we sort of tune our minds in, we can resonate, for example, with animals. Their thinking is very different to ours. They don't think rationally in the rest of it, but they're kind of living on a behavioral type of level in many ways, perhaps on what we would call a feeling level. And if we want to connect with an animal, our telepathy, our vibration has to come down to that level, because all of us have kind of three aspects to our consciousness. We have what in India they call Sat, Chit, Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. And some of the kingdoms of nature are more focused on the sense of being. So, for example, the consciousness of a plant would be much more in that realm of pure being. They have consciousness of being. They know they exist, but they don't necessarily have conscious thought in the same way, and self-awareness in the same way that we would. Same with animals, possibly. We'll talk about this in a moment. So again, we can connect with our vibrations by bringing our vibrations and synchronizing it with, say, the plant kingdom. And we can actually, if we are sensitive beings, connect with plants, connect with the consciousness of plants. Same too, I've talked about how we connect with the universal mind. Oh dear. Same too, as we connect with the universal mind, we also can connect with the idea of the planets and stars, because we also can connect with those energies that are connected the same way mankind would have looked up at the stars and thought about the stars. When we do that, we connect with the whole human experience that's had that experience in the past. Same way when I talked about the fire, we connect with the whole of human experience connected with that fire. Right. So, and it's the same when something happens. Like, I think often if a person has a really brilliant idea, I think, okay, I've got to put that idea into practice pretty quick because it's out there now. It's out there in the universal mind. And if I don't pull that fruit, someone else will pull that fruit. Same with great inventions. They've happened in one place, something's invented, and simultaneously it's invented somewhere else, as if somehow we've connected with that universal vibration. So I'm talking here a lot about the idea of resonance, you know, and that our vibrations could also connect, just as a vibration can connect if we tune it right, can connect with the spirit world. So too, it could connect with other worlds, perhaps, to the worlds of gods and goddesses. It can connect to different animal species, because I'm sure that different animals, for example, like a cat's energy would be very different to a dog's energy, and our vibrationary connection with that species would be different from one to another. Or in the world of snakes, for example, that would be a different type of consciousness to the world of cats and dogs and things like that. So all of these things, I think, connect us through sort of into ideas that connect us also with the collective history of humanity too. Could we not also connect perhaps with the ancient gods? You know, and could we not connect with ancient thoughts and feelings that have been laid down in this universal vibration over centuries, what they might call the Akashic record? So, you know, these are the ideas that I've been toying with before we can open up our talk today. And how do we do it too? Because also, if we in our vibrations change very much during sleep, and our dream consciousness is very different to what we have in conscious life. And I think we in sleep, when our brain's frequency is sort of settled down and all the material thoughts of the general world have rested and the brain's in a state of rest, maybe then we can also connect to those subtle energies and vibrations that connect us to that collective unconscious mind. And similarly in meditation, of course, the mind goes into silence, and in silence we can often feel those subtle vibrations, which I'm saying are not just the spirit world, not just telepathy, but may connect us with the ancient past, with the far future, and whatever way we kind of tune our radio signal of ourselves into, and to our soul mind, as it were, into. So these are some of my thoughts to get it started, and I'd be interested to see what the rest of you think. And your views. So you can, I'm going to have to block.
I married an uncircumcised man 2 times.
I'll have to push them out, I think. So thanks for the sort of opening connections with you. So you can unmute yourselves now if you want to talk to me. It is really important when you do this that you do mute your microphones, please. Otherwise it destroys my flow a little bit there. So any thoughts about vibration? Am I right? What do you think vibration is?
Well, yeah, there are people who say they can talk to animals. They actually say that they know what the animals are feeling and what they're trying to say to you. They must be, if they really can do that, then presumably they're bringing their vibration into the same vibration as the animal that they're talking to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In many ways, isn't it? It's that you think about it when you. I haven't ridden a horse for years, but I used to enjoy horse riding. And before you get on the horse, you have to kind of get to know the horse a little bit so he doesn't throw you off, you know. And you kind of get a kind of, don't you? If you've older than any animal, you get a sort of a connection, don't you?
Yeah.
And they kind of know you.
Horses are extremely sensitive. They really are. I find they're more sensitive than dogs, for instance. Yeah, it's just that there are people who actually make a profession of this. They
imminent.
You know, they charge for. I'll wait till Kismet.
It's like it has to happen.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Delete this person, I think.
It is imminent or
Sorry,
it is
guys.
important.
Important.
Imminent, like important.
I'll have to push them out, I think.
It is imminent or it is important.
Important.
It is imminent.
Yeah, I've to put them in the waiting room.
Yeah, there are people who that they charge for their services, and they say that they can actually talk to your animal. If you're having a problem with it, they can talk to the animal and tell you what the problem is.
Yeah, that's right. And also they're like horse whisperers, don't they, do things like this? And also Barbara Woodhouse, the famous
Yeah,
dog trainer, she always felt that there was a kind of a paranormal connection with her and her dogs that she trained, and was a great
yeah.
believer in telepathy in the day when that was not something people talked about much.
No, because Barbara Woodhouse, I remember her saying once that she had a little gift in her hands that calmed a dog down, and she was able to talk to the dog. Yeah.
And also this
Gosh.
idea, don't you think about this idea, guys, about that we can connect also with perhaps the plant kingdom? Because I know they say that plants will grow if we talk to them, like Prince Charles does, for example. But there's a kind of, if you was to sit and meditate on plants, say when I've sat in nature and meditated, and then I've come out of my meditation and I've looked at the trees in front of me, there's almost like a connection with them. It's like they kind of want to lean over and talk to you almost. I don't know whether I'm going bonkers with this, but there's a sort of energy there, isn't there? There's a sort of energy, but it's not like connecting with someone saying, hi, how you doing? It's sort of like we connect through what I've called through our being, through our through the sat, as it were, of the Sat Chitananda, of the we know we both have this sense of being, and even inanimate objects have a sense of kind of being, like something that's like my grandfather's watch or something. It's not just a piece of metal. I've add value to it by looking at it and saying that's my grandfather's watch. It's not just metal. But I think an object almost has a sense of kind of being, that it's not just this. And objects, like when we do psychometry, for example, on an object, we hold an object, and I use psychometry to teach some of my students about how to connect to the spirit world. We read an object and we hold an object and we say all the vibrations and memories that are in that object. So that object doesn't just have being, it even in a very limited sense has memory too. And that memory, I think, also then can connect into the universal memory. So even an object has a certain level of kind of vibration. It has self-awareness, because I'm relating the idea of vibration here with levels of consciousness, I suppose. Really, I'm saying that when we talk about changing our vibration, what we're doing is changing our level of consciousness. And similarly, surely this also, because we radiate consciousness and we radiate vibration, if we put ourselves into a nice positive state, particularly, positive things tend to happen to us, don't they? And if we get in a real miserable mood and we get into that tamasic negative state of thinking, then negative things tend to happen. Things tend to go wrong, and then another thing goes wrong, and we get more miserable, and another thing goes wrong. So we get ourselves into these cycles in the short term, and also some people do it long term too. They get into habits of negative vibration and attract all sorts of dreadful things into life, and usually blame the world out there. But shouldn't we really actually be blaming ourselves because we've allowed ourselves to get into a negative state of thinking?
Could it be an actual physical vibration though? Because when you speak, I mean, what happens to the vibration? It gets less and less and less, but does it ever completely go away? Is it still vibrating many years later? I've often wondered what happens to the sound wave.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, actually, because every thought we have is there. Because I think of thoughts as being not just a chemical process in the brain, like a materialist might think, but I have a thought and it goes in my brain and it goes out. It's influencing everything around me to a greater or lesser extent, and it keeps on moving. And this is what karma's all about, really, because we are radiating energy and thoughts, and so if I think a real bad thought about someone, it might go out, it might bounce on them, it might cause them harm, and it might bounce back to me now, or maybe long time later, or even a very, very long time later, if you believe in, like I do, in reincarnation, if I come back here again, or if I'm in the spirit world. You know, in the spirit world, even when a person spends time in the spirit world, the thoughts we send out to them, they will continue to feel those vibrations, albeit in a different form and way to we would hear, because time's different things over there.
I've got oh, sorry.
How do we raise our vibrations? You know, we're talking on sort of the mundane level.
Sorry, Valerie, say that again, please. I missed some of that.
Yeah, how do we raise our vibrations? And is doing mantras like Satya Sai Baba told us to do, is that raising our vibrations? What's that? What have mantras got to do with? Do they have anything to do with raising vibrations?
Well,
and how do we raise them?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, Valerie, because mantras are one of the most powerful ways that we can change the vibrations around us on just about everything. I mean, there's mantras. I'm a great, you know, I mean, people think, oh, it's just words. You're just talking words, you know, there's just an endless repetition of some Sanskrit phrase. But the Sanskrit language itself, it's not really like a spoken language. There's one village in India that speaks Sanskrit, but it's not normally taken as a dialogue. It's holy language. It's the language that was based upon the great beings that could meditate upon the universal sounds. All of the sounds came from the one universal sound, Om, and that broke into what we call the bija mantras, which are simple sounds, and that in turn broke into multiple sounds. And from, in the beginning, there was the word, as it were, and from that we can find mantras for just about everything we want in life. Mantras for healing, mantras for protection, mantras to attract good fortune, mantras for marriage, and so on, whatever we may want. And I believe that there's something about that energy, because it resonates with the vibrations that they understood, because they are a vibration, pure vibration. They're based upon, not on language, as it were, but inner sounds. The inner sounds that come from the deepest. I've got to turn the person off.
Never many.
Okay. They come from the deepest sounds of the internal system, whether it be the spirit, I would say it was, or even the bodily sounds. And they understood these things. And by turning them into a mantra, we are actually creating an energy field in ourselves that will lift our vibration tremendously. It will lift the vibration because we're repeating it until our brain, our soul, our spirit is connecting with that sound. In fact, the greatest one of all really is simply Om, to do the Om mantra, because it will take you into that the highest sound of all, which is the universal sound of Om. And that one is perhaps the best mantra we can do. All other mantras, you know, are variations ultimately of the Om mantra. Similarly, I think silence too, meditation, going into the silence of meditation also takes us into, it's like we can understand vibration more from the silence, because it's a bit like a pool. If a pool, the mind is like, can be like a pool, and it can be all splashing with waves all over it, you know. And if we can quieten the mind and it becomes still and it becomes a pure mirrored pool, on the one hand, we have a great understanding. We can understand particularly the idea of our being, you know, because that is there within that pool. But also, the slightest vibration dropped into it, a little tiny stone dropped into a clear pool, you'll be able to see its vibration. A little stone dropped into a raging sea, you won't see the splash. So when we have the inner quietude, that also gives us a kind of a little bit more self-control over our vibration, and helps us to learn how to raise it, quieten it, extend it, tune it into something. And I think all things such as psychic powers and mediumistic powers, they all rely on this ability of ourselves to be in tune with our level of vibration, that we can raise our consciousness. And also, even more so, in the body, when we get the things of the chakras, as they call it, you know, in the spinal system of the body. By focusing on the different chakras, we can also connect with different vibratory levels of our body. They're almost part of the tuning system, but that's probably another whole talk in another time for that. But that's also there as part of our spiritual body that allows us to change our vibration, you know.
Yeah, a lot of the mantras, the Indian mantras, they are directed towards a specific god or goddess that is a personification of an aspect of God. So are those similar to what you were talking about, raising vibration, or is that a different system altogether?
Okay, well, I would say it like this, because I mean, if you think of, there's only one God, that's the universal God that's omnipresent everywhere. You know, that's the God, as it were, isn't it? Yeah. But God also manifests, as it were, can manifest in different aspects. So that's where we see the idea of gods and goddesses in all of the religions of the world, whether that be Jesus as a representation of man, as it were, mankind, or whether we see it as a avatar when you're talking about Sai Baba, or whether we see it as the idea of a god, whether that be an ancient Greek or Roman or Indian god. Those are manifestations of the idea of the aspect of the, you know, of the Godhead, but a formed version of the Godhead. And I would say that, you know, when we think about sort of when people put their thoughts collectively onto something, it creates its own self-consciousness. So a god, for example, with many people worshipping that god endlessly and thinking about it and sending their thoughts, we create a thought form, perhaps, that becomes that aspect of the main Godhead, but also the form is created by our constant focus upon it. So all of the gods have a reality. There's a way of describing it is like the idea that in ancient Tibet, for example, they create what they call a tulpa. Now, when they meditate, this was Alexander David and Neil's books these came into, well worth a read sometime. And that's Alexander David and a female. And she went to Tibet and they meditated upon a monk, an illusionary monk, something that would just be there who would help them. And he actually they formed a full manifestation that was actually had its own consciousness. And this is what they called a tulpa, a conjured being, as it were. Now, when we put a lot of thought into something, could we not also, I mean, this is just food for thought, but could we not also be creating and manifesting things in the astral realms that we created by our own thoughts? So that, for example, Ganesha as a god, for example, in the Indian religion, the idea of an elephant-headed man is impossible. It's an impossible possibility in terms of a physical being to be like that, as far as we know. But could it not be that we've created by the people constantly worshipping Ganesha, which is one of the main gods of India, have actually created a real being that has created a real Ganesha because it's manifested in the astral through the worship of many, you know? I mean, it's a thought.
I think Ganesha anyway is a representation of aspects anyway. The big tummy is there's a book, I've forgotten what it's called now, I've got it, but they're all representations of qualities So
I'm saying maybe it's more than just a representation. Maybe we've created that. We've created that being, and that being can therefore help us. And that's the being has been infused with divine, with worshipful thoughts. They actually become a god. That we create. We perhaps even create the god. I'm not saying it's just a symbolic thing, saying that they are real.
Yeah.
There are people actually in the West who I came across a forum once, and they were all discussing tulpas, and they said they had created tulpas, and that they found that they thought they were real beings, and they were asking for all sorts of advice on what to do with the tulpa. Was it cruel to try and stop the tulpa and get rid of the tulpa? Would it be like a murder almost? It was very interesting, but these people really did think that they created actual physical beings.
So, there was a group in Canada that decided to create an artificial spirit called Philip. I don't know if you've read any of this, and if I get it right, so they sat in a group and meditated upon this spirit called Philip, and they gave Philip a whole past, a whole history, a whole he'd thrown himself off the battlements after a love affair had gone wrong. And then Philip the spirit started coming through mediums, and they were getting qualification, they were getting proofs of Philip through people who knew nothing about this. So they created an artificial spirit, as it were, with its own manifestation. Whether it was a conscious spirit or not, whether it was self-conscious or not, is another question. And they even did this with things like had Philip the spirit tapping out messages through a table tilting, and that table was even tapping out messages without any of the people touching it. It was an animated table that was tapping out messages. So it's possible perhaps to create beings through our mental focus.
I think in Alexander David Neal's book, where she talks about the tulpas, I think that some people actually saw her tulpa.
Yeah, physically saw him as a cheery monk, and he went a bit weird in the end too, I believe.
She wanted to get rid of him, didn't she? And she didn't know how to. So it took about 6 months or something to actually.
They had to do the reverse. They had to sort of use.
Yes.
So is healing the same, working on this different vibration? I don't know if you can hear.
Sorry, say that again, Caroline. Couldn't quite make out what you said.
So healing when I used to massage and I used to pick up on, they would say, oh, I'm feeling better, I'm feeling heat, and I would feel their pain type of thing. Is that sort of picking up on their vibration type of thing? So it's a similar sort of thing, it's all vibration and frequency, or is it just sort of maybe lucky guess? No,
I think it is, isn't it? I mean, healing is a vibrationary thing in many respects. I mean, certainly as a healer, I haven't worked fully as a healer, but if I've done a little bit of healing on people, you feel very sensitized to the person's psychological state, their physical state, and you will then pour energy through yourself to help to restore that person by giving them, I suppose, what we would call prana energy or chi energy or whatever, isn't it? And also you're helping them in many respects with healing too, to change their vibration too, because a lot of the problems we have with health, the body is the last thing that goes wrong. What goes wrong first, surely, is the spirit. A person, for example, might suffer stress all their life, and that stress might come out in some form, such as a cancer or all sorts of illness, stress being one of the most dangerous of them all, really. But all types of repetitive thinking that's gone wrong will come out in bad way. Even jealousy could create problems, or fear could create problems, or whatever, whatever negative type of emotion. And I suppose the healer's job is to help in some ways to change that vibration, to turn it from something dark into something light. The energy's still there, but we've got to dissipate the darkness. Would you say that, Caroline? Would that be the way you think you work?
That sounds about right, because obviously when I was doing the massage and I could feel what was wrong with them, obviously I didn't always say, because and I didn't know why I felt what was wrong, and then we were verifying it, and then obviously we were saying, well, you've cured us, not cured, but like, oh, I feel much better. I feel this strange heat, and I could feel it in my hands, the heat. Weirdly enough, and I haven't done it for a long time now, but you know, I was just wondering if it was a different vibration, and it just sounded about right because you could feel it. Didn't know where it was coming from. You could feel what they were feeling, type of thing.
You worked as a with massage therapy, Caroline. Perhaps you ought to start thinking about looking into healing.
Well, I was thinking that. Funny enough, I was thinking that the other day. I don't know why, because it wasn't the path I was going to go down, but it just popped into my head, and I thought, shall I give it a go? Shall I not? But I think that's maybe where I might go next.
Yeah, look up something like the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. That's a good place to start, I think, with that type of thing.
I'll have a little look at that. I'll have a look at that.
And they got a website. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
So any other thoughts on that, anybody? Okay, all right. Yes, okay. Yeah, so I think that's some quite interesting ideas seeded there, isn't it, really? Also this idea that, you know, if the whole universe is vibration, we only need to sort of just get our vibration, as it were, in the right place. And how we do that, there's no, like, mantras is one way, meditation is another way. And I think really, in a way, it's hard to explain how you do it. You kind of just have to kind of open yourself to things. Like I said, you open yourself, for example, to the power of nature. I mean, if you sit quietly in nature and you really let yourself just open up, you feel all sorts of energies in some places that you could never explain logically. It's the same sort of idea in Chinese thought, in the Taoism, for example, where they really had a very close connection with nature. And this idea of feng shui, that there's certain energies that are flowing across the landscape, that if we harness them right, they can be very beneficial to us. So we can get very positive energies that can, and where we position things and place our buildings, and where, if we're close to mountains and streams and so forth, it creates, or graveyards, it creates different sorts of energies in our lives. And I think we've become very insensitive to these ancient things since we've become, you know, materially advanced in the world. We've lost, I think, so much in our lives, and we've lost our connection with that unconscious mind in ourselves too. We are living as surface beings, you know, we're living just on the surface personality, the surface knowledge, and yet each of us, if we can just quietly allow ourselves to open up to the other aspects of ourselves, we'll find that we have within us an incredible knowledge that we can draw upon, that's already there, you know, that doesn't require learning, that we can just know things. And this is why, when, you know, sometimes when you're doing mediumship, you think, how do I know that? I just know it. Because what you're doing is you're connecting with that vasana, I think they call it, that huge, great connection of vibrations and thoughts, the universal mind, that aspect that we're all connected. Like all of us here now talking, and anybody watching this video later will automatically connect with our vibrations, you know, because our vibrations are now set up by sitting together and talking together. We've sort of set up a little bit of energy there, and then more people come and look at it, and that creates more energy. And you've actually creating, even on a channel like this, you're creating an actual real energy. That's why when we bring our thoughts together, we can manifest. And this is why the media particularly is such a precious thing and used so wrongly. You know, the media is used entirely really for greed. It's entirely for advertising and trying to sell and the rest of it. It's creating these sort of, like Pat was saying about tulpas, you know, it's creating ever such dangerous energy beings in the world, when really what we should all be doing is coming together with a spirit of love and joy and happiness. And we between us could be creating all sorts of incredible energies that could be really feeding the world with good stuff. and a happy world that doesn't require all these materialistic, unnecessary, greedy things.
I'm just wondering about mantras. You were talking about mantras. I'm just wondering if they actually create a particular physical vibration, because they say, you know, you shouldn't just sit there and say the mantra, you have to actually chant it in a particular way. That's what I've heard about mantras. Anyway, I've heard people say that. And maybe they are setting up an actual physical vibration. That's why they work with different things, you know, to attract fortune or attract a partner or something like that.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you
could,
can chant a mantra inwardly, Pat, but they also have a physical effect. I mean, when I went to India and I was looking at some of the great temples there's one particular one we looked at, and it's got I can't remember the name of it now, but it had a capstone on it which was made out of solid granite, and there was no way that could have been put there in the past. And I was saying to my Indian friends, well, how did they get that on there then if it was so huge and so heavy? And he said, oh, easy, they did it with mantra.
All right. I don't know, I've seen that.
They took it for granted it was done with mantra, and that was and I thought, well, is that just a belief or is that real? And then when you look into other cultures, the same ideas are said about Egyptian things, and the same ideas are said about the ideas of the ziggurats in South America. The endemic cultures talk about that mantras were used. And I think we've forgotten the power.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, there's also the Aboriginal culture, isn't there, where they say they can kill somebody with a look or pointing the stick. They say they can kill somebody and they also have this thing of being able to connect with each other from vast distances. But we seem to have forgotten all that, don't we?
Yeah, they say the Aboriginal culture hasn't changed, well, it has now, but it hadn't changed since Stone Age time. So that what they reckon was what the original Stone Age mentality was. That's what archaic man was like.
Yeah, the purest culture in the world, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think if the Aborigines weren't like that, I expect for thousands and thousands of years, millions of years perhaps, human culture was like that. The Aborigines don't leave a lot of mark that would have been able to find centuries to come, because they didn't build buildings and things like that, and so we would that's why we can't find much trace of early man, because they didn't actually build much, but they may have had an extremely advanced culture, but advanced in a different way to the way we understand it.
Yeah, maybe animals still do that then, do you think?
I think so. Maybe, I think there's I think we underestimate the consciousness of animals too, because they if you think about the nature of an animal's thinking, it's going to be different. Would be very hard for us to imagine being a cat, say, for example. I can kind of imagine being our cat Boo. I can kind of imagine. I go and have a look around for a bit. I go around the neighbours for a while. I come back here for some biscuits, and we'll go and have a look at the badgers up in the woods. So I can see that. But there's also something, I don't know, when you connect with an animal, and I know lots of people do, you can kind of get a taste of their consciousness, and it's very different to ours.
Yes, well, they must see everything in pictures for a start, not. Yeah.
But how do and then also another thing I say about this, with this idea of consciousness, it must also kind of have weight as well, because I have more consciousness, I think, than an ant. An ant has only a little bit of consciousness. My Jane might disagree, but an ant only has a little bit of consciousness, and I know that I have more consciousness than an ant. Although an ant might have more ultimately, because it could be the whole colony that creates the consciousness rather than one individual. So there must be some sort of quality to this too, that each of us has a certain amount of consciousness. It's measurable. That we all have a certain amount that we can be part of our existence.
So do you think we're all born with the same amount, or and that by doing mantras and meditation and going within, then we increase that amount, or it's a single amount for everyone?
Yeah, a good point. Are all people equal? That's what you're saying consciously, you know.
Yeah. Tricky one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because I'm going to sound arrogant, because I think no. Because I think some people have, I think if you look at human beings, it's almost like multiple types of people, isn't there? I mean, some people are clearly not particularly awake. You know, that I think some people are definitely in a world that is almost there with the animals. You know, that they're interested in shopping, they're interested in drinking, they're interested in all the whatever, you know, all the mundanities of the world, and don't think any further than that, and quite happy to think like that. And then there's other people who are questioning the life all the time, who are trying to advance themselves spiritually in some way or another, or people that are highly compassionate. They've got to be different, haven't they? They've got to be different. And I think we can't say that, or I don't think we can say all people are equal, because I think we, at heart, behind each of our individual consciousnesses, there's the one consciousness. We are all part. You know, when Ramana Maharishi, for example, says, you know, to find out what the meaning of existence is, just keep asking yourself, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And when you ask who am I, ultimately you find you're not anything. You are this universal consciousness. That's all we all are. We're all manifestations of that universal consciousness. So ultimately we're all one. We're all the same. So we have to, compared to this great vastness of the universe, we're all just little grains of sand, and some of those sands are a little bit bigger than others may be, but it's minuscule, the differences on one level. But I do think that people are different, and I know it's unpopular to think like that nowadays. Everybody's all got to be winners, everybody's all got to get a prize, but people are different, and some people I think have been here many times, and some people this is their first time in the world. And although that might sound, you know, and some people bring really heavy karma into this world, and some people bring very good karma into this world, and their lives manifest accordingly. So no, I think it's many, many, many people, and every person is completely unique, completely different. Nothing can ever be repeated. This is the glory of it all, the uniqueness of it all. And I think people are all on different levels of evolutionary scale of consciousness. And I think all of us have the opportunity, because all of us have equal free will, perhaps, that we can all perhaps change that level through hard work. You know, and in this life, we can, like, you know, you choose mantras, or you might just choose doing compassionate deeds to other people, that karmic form of manifestation. Just by doing good deeds through life, you've progressed yourself, you know. No, it's not all the same. It's people are different. I think, and that has to be said, that that's the way it is. I don't know, do you disagree with me, anyone? I mean,
well, that was the point of Animal Farm, wasn't it? All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yeah, well, that was, they were twisting it around, weren't they? Really?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love Orwell too. He's brilliant.
Oh yeah.
And Aldous Huxley particularly, I think. Even better.
Yes, yeah.
I always put those together somehow, because they were both offered different dystopias. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're finished there now on the actual recorded bit. So I'm just going to say a goodbye to all the people joining us from YouTube, and then I'll just turn the recording off then, and if anybody wants to ask anything on more personal levels or thing, and you prefer not to talk on camera, you've got your chances now. So I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to become a patron, you know, come and join us on Zoom. As a patron, you help with our work on all sorts of levels, helping us to get the spiritual center together we're trying to do, and some of the charitable work we also do with it. And like this show here, it's all done for nothing, all the things that I put in for patron. And also we have coming up soon, also Jane and I are going to be doing some work in the theatre, in which we are also raising money. And again, we put all of that into this patron fund. So thank you for all the patrons for joining me. And those of you that want to become a patron, you know, have a look in the description below. So I'm going to say to you, bye for now. And I'm going to turn the recording off now, so that the rest of you can just have another chat with me.